The town of Dust Haven stood silent that evening, the setting sun painting the sky in streaks of blood and gold. The marketplace, usually filled with the chatter of cattle traders and whiskey merchants, was wrapped in a heavy, uneasy quiet. On the raised wooden platform at the center of it, all stood a young woman. Dirt smudged across her pale cheeks, wrists bound by coarse rope, eyes trembling with fear but refusing to shed a tear. Her name was Clara. Just a few days ago, she'd been the daughter of a humble rancher, free as the prairie wind. Now she was property, stolen by a ruthless trader who planned to sell her to the highest bidder, like she was nothing more than livestock. The crowd gathered slowly, whispers passing through the men like fire through dry brush. "A fine one," someone muttered. "She'll fetch a good price." The trader grinned, his hands rough as he pushed Clara forward into the light. She winced but didn't speak. Inside, she burned with quiet rage. She wasn't going to beg. She wasn't going to let them see her break. Among the onlookers stood a man at the edge of the crowd. Tall, dust-streaked, his hat pulled low over eyes that had seen too much. The sheriff knew him as Cole Tanner, a quiet cowboy who kept mostly to himself since the war ended. He'd lost everything: his home, his brothers, his peace. All he had left was his horse, a weathered ranch, and a heart that no longer believed in kindness. Yet as his gaze locked on Clara, something in him stirred. Something he thought he'd buried long ago. The auctioneer's voice boomed, slicing through the silence like a whip. "Who'll start the bid?" "Strong hands, a quick wit. She'll work hard if you teach her to." A murmur ran through the crowd as men shouted numbers. Each call made Clara's pulse race faster. Her eyes darted toward the horizon, searching for escape that wasn't there. Cole watched her flinch with every raised hand, every sneer, every word of ownership thrown her way. He couldn't understand it, why this stranger's pain cut through him like barbed wire. But as the trader lifted her chin roughly to show her face to the bidders, Cole's boots moved on their own. He stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "That's enough." The auctioneer froze, irritation flickering in his eyes. "Cowboy, you got coin to talk, or are you just interrupting business?" Cole's jaw tightened. "I've got enough," he said, pulling out a small leather pouch from his vest. The sound of metal coins striking wood echoed through the square. "She's mine to protect now." The crowd fell silent. The trader scowled, uncertain whether to argue with the man whose stare felt sharper than a drawn gun. Clara looked up for the first time, confusion mixing with disbelief. Who was this man and why had he intervened? The cowboy didn't look at her as he cut the ropes from her wrists. He simply said, "You're safe now." Safe. The word felt foreign, almost mocking. But there was something in his tone, something raw and unpolished, that made her believe he meant it. The crowd slowly dispersed, muttering about the fool who'd just wasted his money on a girl no one wanted. Cole led Clara away from the square, his horse tied nearby. The silence between them was heavy. Finally, she whispered, "Why did you do that?" He didn't answer right away. He just looked at the open plains ahead, the sun slipping behind the hills. "Because no one else would," he finally said. "And I ain't letting another soul get sold in this cursed town." That night, as the fire crackled beside them under a star-streaked sky, Clara sat wrapped in a worn blanket, staring into the flames. Every flicker reminded her of the life that had been torn away. But now there was this stranger, this quiet man who'd stepped into her storm without asking why. Cole sat nearby, cleaning his revolver, pretending not to notice the way her hands still trembled. He didn't ask her story, and she didn't offer it. But something unspoken began to bloom between them. A fragile thread of trust woven in the stillness of the desert night. Morning came with the cry of eagles and the endless whisper of wind through the plains. Clara awoke to the smell of coffee and the sound of boots scuffing against the dirt. Cole was already up, feeding his horse, his hat pulled low as if shielding his thoughts from the world. For a moment, she simply watched him. There was something steady about him, something that made her heart feel less like a fragile bird trapped in a cage. "We'll ride to Redwater," he said without turning around. "Got a friend there who can help you start over." Start over. The words filled her with both hope and fear. After what she'd endured, could she really start again? As they rode, the silence between them felt less heavy, more alive. The wind tangled Clara's hair, the sun warmed her face, and the cowboy's presence beside her, calm, protective, felt like a promise. Yet danger in the west never stayed far. By noon, dust clouds rose behind them. The trader and his men, furious at having lost their prize. Cole saw them first. His jaw set hard. They're coming. He pulled his horse off the trail, motioning for Clara to follow. They rode through the canyon, hooves pounding the earth like thunder. Shots rang out, echoing against the cliffs. One bullet grazed Cole's shoulder, tearing through his shirt. Clara screamed, fear clawing at her throat. "Keep riding," he shouted. They found shelter in an abandoned barn, its roof half collapsed but strong enough to hide them. Cole tied his horse and pressed a hand to his bleeding arm. Clara tore a strip from her dress and wrapped it around the wound. Their eyes met, close, breathless. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, voice trembling. "You don't even know me." He looked at her, pain in his eyes, not from the wound but from something deeper. "Because I've seen what happens when good men look away," he said quietly. "I ain't that man anymore." Her hands stilled. The walls between them, built of pain and fear, began to crack. When the riders finally left, giving up the chase, Cole slumped against the wall, exhausted. Clara knelt beside him, brushing a strand of hair from his face. "You saved me twice," she murmured. "Guess I owe you my life now." He gave a faint, crooked smile. "You don't owe me nothing. Just promise me you'll live it." The simplicity of his words broke something in her, the last piece of the girl who'd been afraid to hope. She nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Days later, they reached Redwater. Cole handed her the reins and smiled faintly. "This is where you start again." She hesitated, her heart torn. "And what about you?" He tipped his hat, eyes soft. "Me? I've got more wrongs to set right." Then, without waiting for thanks, he turned and rode into the horizon. As she watched him disappear into the blazing sun, Clara realized that not all saviors wear white hats or carry badges. Some just carry the weight of their own mistakes and still choose to protect others. And in that moment, she made a silent vow. She'd live free, she'd stay strong, and she'd never forget the cowboy who taught her that even in the darkest of places, kindness still had the power to save a soul. In a world where cruelty ruled the frontier, one man chose compassion over silence. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Old West Legends for more powerful stories of courage, love, and redemption from the untamed heart of the Wild West.